You think strength is about never breaking, about pushing harder, about being tougher than everyone else. You've been sold a lie, and it's destroying you from the inside out. Listen carefully, because what I'm about to tell you contradicts everything you've been taught about discipline, about strength, about what it takes to be a man in this world. This isn't another motivation speech. This is a warning. The strongest men break first. Not the weak ones. Not the ones who give up easily. The strongest. The most disciplined. The ones who push through pain, who never quit, who pride themselves on their unbreakable willpower. They are the ones who shatter completely when the pressure finally becomes too much. And the pressure always becomes too much. I'm going to tell you about Marcus. Not his real name, but his story is real. 28 years old. 6-figure income. Disciplined morning routine. Never missed a workout in 3 years. Meditated daily. Read the books. Followed the protocols. He was everything you're trying to become. The warrior. The unstoppable force. The man who conquered himself. Until the day he couldn't get out of bed. Not because he was lazy. Not because he lost motivation. Because his body simply refused to move. His mind, that iron will he'd forged over years of relentless self-discipline, had finally cracked under its own weight. He didn't break because he was weak. He broke because he was too strong. Too rigid. Too committed to a samurai secret that the modern world has completely forgotten. Here's what they don't tell you about traditional samurai culture. Yes, they valued discipline. Yes, they trained relentlessly. But the greatest samurai understood something that separates legends from corpses. Something that Miyamoto Musashi, the most famous swordsman in Japanese history, discovered after killing over 60 men in combat. Something that kept him alive when stronger, faster warriors died around him. Flexibility is survival. Rigidity is death. The bamboo bends in the storm. The mighty oak stands firm, proud, strong. Guess which one is still standing when the hurricane passes? The oak shatters. The bamboo survives. Not because it's stronger, because it knows when to yield. You've been taught to be the oak. To never bend. To never compromise. To push through everything. To treat every single day like a battlefield where surrender means failure. You've been trained to see flexibility as weakness, adaptation as giving up, rest as laziness. And it's killing you. Marcus believed in the grind. He'd wake at 4:30 every morning. Cold shower immediately. No snooze button. No excuses. 45 minutes of intense exercise. Meal prepped breakfast, precisely measured macros. Meditation for 20 minutes. Then work. 10, 12, sometimes 14-hour days. Evenings were for learning, for building side projects, for becoming better, stronger, more capable. His friends called him obsessed. He called himself disciplined. He looked at people who slept 8 hours with contempt. People who took rest days were weak. People who said they were tired were making excuses. He was building himself into something unbreakable. He was building a prison. The ancient samurai had a term. Jūnan-sa. It translates roughly to flexible strength. The ability to be both powerful and adaptable. Hard when necessary. Soft when required. They understood that a sword forged too hard becomes brittle. It shatters on impact. A blade must have flexibility, must be able to absorb force, must know when to yield to survive the strike. You are forging yourself too hard. And you don't even realize it. Every motivational video tells you to be harder. More disciplined. More relentless. More extreme. They show you people waking up at 3 in the morning, training until they vomit, working until they collapse. And they call this strength. They call this discipline. They call this what separates winners from losers. They're creating an entire generation of Marcus. Men who will achieve incredible things for 3 years, 5 years, maybe even 10 years. And then they'll break. Completely. Catastrophically. Not gradually. Not with warning signs they recognize. They'll wake up one day and the engine that's been driving them will simply refuse to start. Depression. Burnout. Adrenal fatigue. Chronic illness. Mental breakdown. The medical terms don't matter. What matters is this: you cannot sprint a marathon. And life is not a sprint. It's not even a marathon. It's an ultra-endurance event that lasts decades, and the strategy that works for the first 5 miles will destroy you over the full distance. Marcus didn't see it coming. How could he? Every metric told him he was winning. His income was growing. His body was stronger. His routine was flawless. From the outside, he was the success story, the inspiration. The proof that extreme discipline creates extreme results. From the inside, he was dying. His sleep quality had deteriorated for months, but he ignored it. Champions don't complain. His injuries were accumulating, but he pushed through. Pain is weakness leaving the body. His relationships were suffering, but he rationalized it. Successful people make sacrifices. His joy had evaporated, but he didn't care. Happiness is for people without ambition. He measured his worth by his output. His identity was built on never stopping, on being harder than his circumstances, on proving every single day that he was strong enough to force reality to bend to his will. And then reality stopped bending. It broke him instead. This is where your story diverges from his. Because you're hearing this now, before the collapse. Before the moment when your body's check engine light doesn't just illuminate, it explodes. Before you learn the hardest lesson in the most painful way possible. The samurai who survived weren't the strongest. They were the wisest. Let me take you deeper into what actually happened to Marcus. Because understanding his breakdown is understanding your future if you don't change course now. It started small. That's how it always starts. A workout that felt unusually difficult. He pushed through. That's what you do. A project deadline that required 3 consecutive nights of 4-hour sleep. He handled it. That's what champions do. A persistent headache that lasted 5 days. He took some ibuprofen and kept moving. Pain is temporary. Then the cracks started showing. His morning routine, once effortless, began requiring enormous mental effort. Getting out of bed felt like moving through concrete. The cold shower that used to energize him now felt like torture he had to endure. His meditation sessions, previously calm and focused, became 20 minutes of fighting his own spiraling thoughts. But Marcus had an explanation for everything. He was just tired. He needed to push harder. He needed more discipline, not less. When you've built your entire identity on never quitting, the solution to struggle is always the same. More force. More willpower. More strength. He doubled down. Earlier wake-ups. Longer workouts. Even stricter diet. He eliminated the few remaining pleasures in his routine. No music during workouts, that was distraction. No social phone time, that was weakness. No casual conversations, that was wasted energy. Every single minute had to be optimized, weaponized, turned into fuel for his relentless forward progress. The samurai understood something crucial about warfare. You cannot fight at maximum intensity constantly. Even the greatest warrior needs to sheath his sword. The blade requires maintenance. The body requires recovery. The mind requires rest. Fight every battle at full force and you'll win the first few encounters but lose the war. Marcus was fighting every moment of his life at full force. Morning was a battle. Work was warfare. Evening routines were combat. Even his sleep had become a tactical operation, tracking devices, optimization protocols, supplements to maximize every minute of rest. He had turned life itself into an enemy that needed to be dominated. And life doesn't lose that fight. Ever. There's a principle in traditional Japanese martial arts called Mai. It refers to the dynamic space between combatants. Not just physical distance, but timing, rhythm, the ebb and flow of engagement. Masters of the sword understood that you don't maintain constant pressure. You advance and retreat. You create openings. You let your opponent commit, then you counter. You're in constant advance. You never retreat. You never create space. You never let the moment breathe. You're committed to every single exchange at maximum intensity, and you think this makes you formidable. It makes you vulnerable. Marcus's body tried to tell him. The persistent injuries that never fully healed. The digestion issues that kept worsening. The resting heart rate that kept climbing. The testosterone levels that his blood work showed dropping year over year despite perfect training and nutrition. His body was screaming at him in every language it knew. He interpreted every signal as weakness to overcome rather than information to integrate. This is the fatal error. This is where modern discipline culture has poisoned an entire generation. You've been taught that your body is an obstacle to transcend, an enemy to defeat, a weak element that must be forced into compliance through superior willpower. The samurai saw the body as the weapon. You don't abuse your sword. You don't force your blade to do things beyond its design. You understand its nature, you work with its properties, you maintain it with respect and intelligence. The greatest swordsmen had relationships with their weapons. They understood that partnership with the tool was superior to domination of it. You're trying to dominate yourself. And it's destroying you both. Month 14 of Marcus's unbroken routine, something shifted. His performance at work started declining. Projects took longer. His thinking felt foggy. Clients noticed. His boss noticed. But Marcus had an answer. He needed to work harder. More hours. More focus. More discipline. He cut his sleep from 6 hours to 5. He eliminated rest days completely. He increased his caffeine intake to maintain alertness. He was fighting harder than ever. The warrior refuses to surrender. Month 16, he got sick. Actually sick, not just tired. Flu that lasted 3 weeks. He tried to maintain his routine through it. Attempted workouts while feverish. Forced himself to meditate while his body begged for sleep. Sat at his desk accomplishing nothing while his immune system desperately tried to heal him. The bamboo bends. The oak refuses. Guess who recovers faster from the storm? Month 18, the injuries accumulated to the point where his workouts became damage sessions rather than training sessions. Chronic shoulder pain. Persistent knee inflammation. Lower back issues that made even sitting uncomfortable. His physical therapist suggested complete rest for 6 weeks. Marcus heard weakness and ignored the advice. He modified his exercises but never stopped. Stopping was failure. The ancient concept of mushin in samurai philosophy translates to no mind. Not emptiness, but flow. The state where action happens without forced effort, where technique emerges naturally, where the warrior responds perfectly without conscious deliberation. You achieve mushin through practice, yes, but also through trust. Trust in your training. Trust in your preparation. Trust that you don't need to force every single moment. Marcus had lost all trust. Every action required maximum conscious effort. Every decision was warfare. Every moment was a test he might fail if he didn't apply sufficient force. He was locked in permanent mental combat with himself. Month 20, something broke. Not dramatically. Not obviously. He just woke up one morning and couldn't find a reason to get out of bed. Not because he was lazy. Because the entire structure of meaning he built had collapsed. The routine that gave him identity felt completely hollow. The goals that drove him felt completely pointless. The discipline he worshipped felt like a cage. This is the moment that separates the men who rebuild from the men who stay broken forever. Marcus lay in bed, unable to move, and had to make a choice. Double down on force, or finally learn the lesson his body had been teaching him for 2 years. Most men double down. They interpret breakdown as insufficient discipline. They see collapse as proof they weren't strong enough. They conclude that the solution is more of the poison that's killing them. They jump from the fire directly into the furnace and wonder why they are burning alive. Marcus had spent his entire adult life believing a specific story about strength. Real men push through. Real discipline never wavers. Real warriors never retreat. These weren't just beliefs, they were his identity. Changing them meant destroying who he thought he was and rebuilding from rubble. This is where you are right now. You might not be in bed unable to move. But you're on the same path. You feel it already, don't you? The increasing effort required to maintain what used to feel natural. The growing sense that you're running on fumes pretending to be fuel. The quiet knowledge that something is unsustainable but you can't stop because stopping feels like death. You're approaching Marcus's moment. The only question is whether you'll learn the samurai secret before the collapse or after it. Let me make this clear, after is exponentially harder. Rebuilding from complete breakdown takes years. Learning to bend before you shatter takes courage, but it's infinitely easier than reassembling yourself from pieces. So what is the actual secret? What did the samurai understand that you've forgotten? It's elegantly simple and devastatingly hard to implement if you've built your identity on being unbreakable. Strategic surrender is superior to total warfare. The master swordsman doesn't block every attack with pure force. He deflects. He evades. He creates angles where his opponent's strength works against them. He wins fights by not fighting the way his enemy expects. He understands that the hardest defense is knowing when not to defend at all. Apply this to discipline. You're blocking every temptation with pure force. You're meeting every moment of resistance with maximum effort. You're treating every single day like a battle where anything less than complete victory is complete failure. This works brilliantly until it stops working. And when it stops catastrophically. The samurai approach: choose your battles with ruthless intelligence. Fight fiercely where it matters. Yield strategically where it doesn't. Conserve energy for critical moments instead of burning it constantly on everything. Build a rhythm of intensity and recovery rather than permanent maximum output. You're thinking this sounds like weakness. Like making excuses. Like the soft path that average people take. This is your conditioning talking. This is the modern discipline cult that has completely misunderstood what sustainable high performance actually requires. Listen to Miyamoto Musashi, who wrote the Book of 5 Rings after a lifetime of actual combat. You should not have a favorite weapon. To become overly attached to one weapon is to lose the flexibility to adapt. He's not talking about swords. He's talking about approaches, strategies. The man who only knows force is helpless when force fails. You have one weapon, willpower. You apply it to everything. Wake up? Willpower. Workout? Willpower. Work? Willpower. Resist temptation? Willpower. Social situations? Willpower. Every single moment is a willpower deployment. You're a one-strategy fighter in an infinitely complex war. The samurai developed multiple approaches. Force when appropriate. Patience when useful. Retreat when strategic. Deception when necessary. They understood that the fighter with 10 techniques beats the fighter with one technique, even if that one technique is executed perfectly. You need multiple tools. You need discipline, yes, but also intuition. Structure, yes, but also flexibility. Pushing forward, yes, but also strategic retreat. Intensity, yes, but also recovery. You need to develop the wisdom to know which tool fits which moment. Marcus's recovery began when he finally accepted this. He spent 3 months doing almost nothing. Not as punishment. Not as failure. As strategy. His body needed legitimate recovery from years of warfare against itself. He slept 9 hours a night. He took walks instead of workouts. He ate when hungry without tracking macros. He let himself be bored without immediately filling the space with productivity. This period felt like death to him. His identity screamed that he was losing everything. His conditioning told him he was becoming weak, undisciplined, average. Every day without the routine felt like sliding backward. But he stayed with it because he'd finally understood, you cannot sprint forever. The bamboo must bend or it will break. Month 4 of his recovery, something shifted. His energy returned, but it was different. Not the forced, caffeinated, willpower-driven energy he'd manufactured for years. Natural energy. The kind that emerges from a body that's actually rested. The kind that doesn't require constant mental effort to sustain. He started training again, but differently. 3 days per week instead of 7. 60-minute sessions instead of 2 hours. Intensity when appropriate, but also deload weeks where he deliberately reduced volume. He tracked how he felt, not just what he accomplished. He treated soreness as information, not weakness to overcome. His work changed too. He maintained high standards but stopped treating every email like a life or death situation. He took actual lunch breaks. He walked away from his desk when his focus faded instead of forcing more hours. He scheduled easier days after intense days instead of trying to maintain peak output constantly. The results? Within 6 months, he was performing better than his peak before the breakdown. Not because he was working harder. Because he was working with intelligence instead of against himself. His income increased. His relationships improved. His health markers normalized. He looked better, felt better, lived better. But here's what really changed, his relationship with discipline itself. It was no longer his identity. It was a tool he used strategically. Some days required maximum effort, he delivered. Some days required rest, he rested without guilt. He'd learned to flow between states instead of remaining locked in permanent warfare mode. You want the practical application. You want to know exactly how to implement this without losing your edge, without becoming soft, without surrendering the discipline that's brought you this far. Fair. Let's get specific. First, understand the difference between strategic flexibility and weakness. Weakness is avoiding difficulty because it's uncomfortable. Flexibility is choosing when and how to engage difficulty for maximum effectiveness. Weakness is quitting when things get hard. Flexibility is recognizing when pushing harder produces diminishing returns and adjusting strategy accordingly. The samurai didn't fear death. But they didn't seek unnecessary death either. They valued their lives because staying alive meant continuing to perfect their art. Throwing yourself at every challenge with maximum force isn't courage, it's lack of strategy. True courage is doing what's effective even when your ego wants you to prove your toughness. Your ego is destroying you right now. It demands that you never appear weak, never take the easy path, never do anything that might make someone think you're not completely committed. Your ego will kill you to prove a point to people who aren't even watching. Here's the framework. The samurai organized their approach to combat around several principles. We're going to adapt these to your daily discipline practice. This isn't theory, this is operational strategy that you implement starting tomorrow. Principle 1. Shin, Gi, Tai. Mind, technique, body. All three must be developed in balance. Develop only your body and you become a strong fool. Develop only your mind and you become a weak philosopher. Develop only technique and you become a mechanical robot. The three must grow together, and sometimes that means intentionally limiting one to let another catch up. Right now you're probably overdeveloped in one area and catastrophically weak in another. Most modern discipline addicts have incredible GI, technique, routine, systems. They have moderate Tai, physical capability. And they have completely underdeveloped Shin, actual mental clarity, emotional intelligence, wisdom. You follow your routine perfectly but you don't know why anymore. You execute the plan but you've lost connection to the purpose. You're technically disciplined but spiritually empty. This imbalance will destroy you. The structure will remain standing while the inside rots completely. How to fix it? Audit yourself honestly. Where are you actually strong? Where are you performing strength theater? Where have you confused repetition with mastery? Then deliberately focus development time on your weakest element, even if that means reducing emphasis on your strength temporarily. If your routine is perfect but your mental health is declining, the routine is the problem, not the solution. If your body is strong but your relationships are dead, your training focus is misaligned. If you're hitting all your goals but you feel nothing, you've optimized the wrong variables. Principle 2, Kuzushi. The art of breaking balance. In Judo and Jiu-Jitsu, you defeat opponents not through superior strength but by breaking their structural balance. Once balance is broken, very little force is required to complete the technique. You're currently trying to overpower everything with force when you should be looking for the leverage points that create natural change. Your discipline routine probably attacks everything with equal intensity. Wake time, workout, diet, work, learning, relationships, hobbies, everything gets the same forceful approach. This is inefficient. Some areas of your life need intensity right now. Others need gentle consistency. Others need complete rest to recover from previous intensity. Strategic approach. Identify your actual priority for this season. Not 5 priorities, 1. What's the dimension of life that genuinely requires maximum effort right now? Pour disciplined intensity there. For everything else, establish minimum viable standards and don't exceed them. Maintain, don't optimize. Example, if your business genuinely needs maximum focus this quarter, fine. Train 3 days weekly instead of 6. Maintain your relationships with quality time over quantity. Let your side projects sit dormant. You're not becoming undisciplined, you're being strategically focused instead of diffusely exhausted. Rotate these priorities quarterly. Next quarter, maybe your body needs focus. You maintain business momentum while increasing training intensity. The quarter after that, relationships get the focus. You're not trying to win everything simultaneously. You're playing the long game with intelligence. Principle 3, Zanshin. Relaxed alertness. The state of awareness without tension. The samurai after striking doesn't collapse or freeze, he remains ready but not rigid. You need to develop the capacity to turn intensity on and off rather than remaining permanently activated. You probably don't have an off switch anymore. You wake up in fight mode and stay there until you collapse at night. Your nervous system is locked in sympathetic activation. You're producing cortisol and adrenaline constantly. This is not sustainable. Your body will force the shutdown eventually. Better to build the switch yourself. Practical implementation. Create transition rituals between intensity and recovery. After focused work, 5 minutes of actual transition before the next thing. After training, deliberate cooldown and breathing before jumping to productivity. Between commitments, moments of genuine rest rather than frantically filling every gap. This feels wasteful. It feels like losing time. It's actually the thing that makes everything else work better. The samurai sharpens his blade between battles. You're swinging a dull sword wondering why each strike requires more effort. Principle 4, Mizu no Kokoro. Mind like water. Water takes the shape of whatever contains it. It flows around obstacles. It's soft enough to drink and powerful enough to carve canyons given time. It adapts without losing its essential nature. You've made yourself into stone, impressive but brittle. This is about relationship with your plans. You probably treat your routine like religious doctrine. Any deviation feels like failure. Any modification feels like weakness. This rigidity guarantees eventual shattering. The plan should serve you, you shouldn't serve the plan. Give yourself explicit permission to adjust based on reality. Slept terribly? Modify today's training. Legitimately sick? Full rest without guilt. Major life stress? Reduce non-essential commitments temporarily. This isn't weakness, this is fighting the war you're actually in instead of the war you planned for. The samurai trained extensively, but they also understood that the battle never matches the training scenario perfectly. Adaptability in the moment, within trained principles, is superior to rigid execution of predetermined technique. You need framework and flexibility, not just framework. Now we address the fear. Because everything I've told you sounds reasonable intellectually, but there's a voice in your head screaming that flexibility equals failure. That adaptation means you're making excuses. That any reduction in intensity is the beginning of total collapse into mediocrity. This voice is loud, convincing, and completely wrong. This voice is why Marcus broke. It's why you're heading toward breaking. And it's why you need to understand where it comes from and how to override it with something more intelligent. The voice comes from binary thinking that modern motivation culture has embedded in your psychology. You're either grinding or you're giving up. You're either disciplined or you're lazy. You're either all in or you're weak. There is no middle ground, no nuance, no intelligence in the approach, only maximum force or complete surrender. This is not how mastery works in any domain. The greatest martial artists aren't the ones who train with maximum intensity every single day until their bodies break. They are the ones who balance intensity with recovery, who understand periodization, who know that adaptation happens during rest, not during effort. The effort creates the stimulus, the rest creates the growth. You're providing constant stimulus with no recovery. You're not getting stronger, you're accumulating damage. There's a reason professional athletes have off-seasons, rest days, deload weeks. There's a reason elite military units cycle between deployment and recovery. There's a reason even the most intense training programs build in strategic rest. Because biology doesn't care about your motivation. It has laws, and you're not exempt. The samurai understood this deeply. Their training was intense, yes, but also intelligent. They practiced kata, forms that could be done at various intensities. They meditated, active recovery for the mind. They studied strategy and philosophy, development that didn't require physical exhaustion. They built breadth and depth, not just relentless single-vector intensity. You've built a routine that only has one setting, maximum. This creates a catastrophic problem. When life demands more, and it will, you have no reserves. You're already at redline. So you go beyond redline, into actual damage territory, and you call this dedication. It's self-destruction wearing a disciplined costume. Here's what you're actually afraid of. You're afraid that if you ease up even slightly, you'll lose everything. The momentum will die. The progress will stop. The identity you've built will dissolve. And underneath all that discipline and structure, you're terrified you'll discover there's nothing, just an average person who needs extreme measures to stay ahead of his own mediocrity. This fear is lying to you. The truth is precisely inverted. Your current approach is what will make you average. Because you'll burn out completely, lose years to recovery, and waste your prime fighting a war against yourself instead of building something meaningful. The flexible approach is what creates sustained excellence over decades. Think about people who've maintained elite performance for 20, 30, 40 years. Not one-hit wonders. Not flash-in-the-pan intense performers who burned out. Actual sustained excellence. How do they do it? They learn the lesson you're resisting. Sustainability beats intensity over meaningful timeframes. Warren Buffett doesn't work 18-hour days. He reads, thinks, and makes high-quality decisions. Murakami runs slowly every morning and writes, sustainable creativity over decades. Athletes with 20-year careers figured out recovery and longevity. Artists who produce for lifetimes understand rhythm and sustainability. The common thread? They found their version of bamboo flexibility. You're aiming to be the oak. Impressive for a season. Broken by the storm. They are bamboo. Less impressive in any single moment. Still standing after the hurricane. Still producing. Still growing. Still relevant when the oaks are firewood. Let's talk about what actually happens when you implement strategic flexibility. Because you're imagining complete collapse. You're imagining that one rest day becomes never training again. One easy day becomes permanent laziness. Any flexibility becomes the slippery slope to losing everything. This is catastrophic. Thinking, not reality. When Marcus rebuilt his approach with flexibility, here's what actually happened. His baseline remained high. His standards remained elite. But his relationship with the process transformed completely. He wasn't fighting himself anymore, he was optimizing his system. Hard training days became genuinely hard because he was recovered enough to push maximally. Easy days allowed actual recovery instead of accumulated fatigue. His work output increased because he had mental energy, not just caffeinated willpower fumes. His relationships improved because he had emotional bandwidth. His decision-making sharpened because his mind wasn't constantly in survival mode. The paradox: by doing less forced grinding, he accomplished more meaningful work. By training fewer days, his strength increased more effectively. By working fewer frantic hours, his output quality improved. The flexibility didn't make him weaker, it made him systematically more effective. This is the samurai secret in practice. They didn't fight constantly at maximum intensity. They trained intelligently, rested strategically, and when actual combat occurred, they had reserves to deploy. They won fights not through superior exhaustion tolerance but through being prepared when it mattered. You're exhausted constantly, which means when something genuinely important appears, you have nothing extra to give. You're already maxed out on a random Tuesday. When the actual opportunity or crisis emerges, you're running on empty pretending to be full. This is strategic stupidity disguised as commitment. Implement this shift and watch what happens. First week feels wrong. Your conditioning screams that you're failing. Push through this meta-discomfort, discomfort about not being maximally uncomfortable. Second week, you start noticing recovery. Energy that feels different from stimulant energy. Third week, performance in your focused areas starts improving because you're not diffusing effort everywhere. Month 2, you realize you're accomplishing your actual priorities more effectively while feeling significantly better. Month 3, you start understanding that you'd confused exhaustion with productivity. Month 6, you look back and realize the old approach was addiction to suffering, not commitment to excellence. But you have to survive the transition. You have to tolerate the voice calling you weak. You have to trust the process when everything in your conditioning says flexibility equals failure. This is your test. Not pushing through one more workout. Not waking up earlier. Not grinding harder. Your test is developing the wisdom to know when to push and when to yield. So here we are. The final piece. The choice you make right now determines whether you become Marcus before his collapse or Marcus after his transformation. Whether you learn this lesson through wisdom or through catastrophic breakdown. Whether you're the oak or the bamboo when the storm comes. And the storm is coming. Not metaphorically. Literally. Life will test you beyond your current capacity. A health crisis. A relationship crisis. A business crisis. A personal loss. Something will push you past your limits, and the only question is whether you have any flexibility left or whether you shatter completely. The men who make it long-term aren't the hardest. They're the wisest. They didn't avoid being hard, they learned when hardness serves and when it destroys. They built systems that could absorb shock instead of systems that only function under perfect conditions. They became antifragile, not just strong. You want to be antifragile? You need slack in your system. Reserves. Recovery capacity. The ability to scale intensity up and down based on what's actually required. Right now you're a machine with one setting, running continuously, with no maintenance protocol. This machine breaks. Not if. When. The samurai who survived hundreds of duels understood something the dead warriors didn't. Every fight is not the final fight. Winning today while ensuring you can fight tomorrow is superior to winning today so decisively that you can't fight next week. You're fighting every day like it's your last stand. It's impressive. It's also stupid. Here's your implementation protocol. Starting tomorrow, not eventually. Not when things calm down. Not when you finish this current push. Tomorrow. Because there will never be a perfect time to build sustainability, and waiting for perfect time is how you end up broken. Action 1. Identify your actual non-negotiables versus your ego-driven extras. What must happen for genuine progress in your priority area? What are you doing because you think you should, or because it makes you feel disciplined, or because you're afraid of what stopping it means? Cut the extras. Seriously. Not reduce them, cut them completely for 30 days and watch what happens to your actual priority results. Action 2. Build recovery protocols with the same intensity you build work protocols. Your training plan has every exercise specified. Does your recovery plan? You track your productivity. Do you track your restoration? You optimize your morning routine. Have you designed your wind-down routine? Most of you have elaborate discipline systems and zero recovery systems. You're pressing the gas constantly and wondering why the engine is overheating. Action 3. Create flexibility mechanisms. Give yourself explicit permission to adjust based on reality. Feel genuinely terrible today? What's the minimum viable version of your routine? Traveling or disrupted schedule? What's the adapted approach? Sick or injured? What's the modified protocol? Having predetermined flexibility options is not weakness, it's strategic intelligence that prevents total collapse. Action 4. Measure what matters, not what's impressive. You're probably tracking all the wrong things. Hours worked instead of results produced. Days trained instead of strength gained. Routine adherence instead of life satisfaction. You're optimizing metrics that don't correlate with what you actually want. Stop. Define the outcomes that genuinely matter and track those. Ignore everything else. Action 5. Build your identity on principles, not specifics. You're not the guy who wakes at 4:30. You're the guy who starts days intentionally. You're not the guy who never misses workouts. You're the guy who maintains strength and health. You're not the guy who works 80 hours weekly. You're the guy who builds valuable things. See the difference? One is rigid and brittle. One is flexible and sustainable. The ancient samurai built their identity on Bushido, the way of the warrior. Not on specific techniques. Not on particular training schedules. Not on always using the same sword. On principles that could be applied flexibly across changing circumstances. The principles remained absolute. The applications remained adaptable. Your principles should be absolute. Your methods should be flexible. Right now you've made your methods absolute and your principles are whatever justifies the methods. This is completely backward. What are your actual principles? Why are you doing any of this? What's the point of the discipline, the grinding, the relentless pushing? If you can't answer this clearly, you're just addicted to suffering and calling it purpose. If you can answer it, then evaluate whether your current methods actually serve those principles or whether you're just doing hard things to prove you can do hard things. Marcus's breakthrough came when he realized his principle was building a life of meaning, impact, and satisfaction. His methods were destroying all three. The routine had become the purpose instead of serving the purpose. He was sacrificing the goal to worship the process. Once he reoriented around actual principles, the methods became flexible and intelligent instead of rigid and destructive. This is your moment. You've read this far because something resonated. Because part of you knows you're on an unsustainable path. Because you're tired of fighting yourself constantly. Because you want to believe there's a way to be excellent without being exhausted. There is. But it requires you to challenge everything you've built your identity on. It requires admitting that maybe maximum intensity isn't maximum intelligence. It requires the courage to be flexible in a world that celebrates rigidity. It requires trusting that strategic rest is not weakness. The strongest men break first. Unless they learn to bend. The bamboo survives. Not because it's weak. Because it's wise. Your choice is simple but not easy. Remain the oak and wait for the storm to break you, or become the bamboo and bend with pressure you cannot prevent. The ancient samurai chose wisdom over force. They chose survival over pride. They chose effectiveness over appearance. They understood that the warrior who lives to fight another day beats the warrior who dies heroically in a fight that didn't matter. What will you choose? The impressive shattering of the oak, or the quiet survival of the bamboo? Your future self is watching this decision. Choose wisely.